Good evening. Happy Monday to everybody. I think quite a bit of the people in the United States are beginning to experience a little bit of cold weather here. And that began for us last Tuesday. Pretty, could pretty well just draw a line. Tuesday afternoon last week, that's when winter began for folks in North Dakota. And that, ended up being a special thing because uh, I had an appointment out of town that night. And so we drove out in the afternoon and drove back, probably starting at about 7:45, 8 o'clock that night. Drive that's normally about an hour and 20 minutes. And, we were doing it in a storm. Now, if you have any experience driving on the interstates up in the northern part of the country during a snowstorm, you are very familiar with something that happens. Is that there's basically one set of decently well defined tire tracks in the right lane. In the right lane, there's the two tire tracks. People tend to just want to stay on those tire tracks. And I think actually this experience of driving in a snowstorm at night gives us a pretty good idea of uh, kind of the way that tradition works. That tire track that was in front of me that I kept the car aligned with most of the time, that kind of represents tradition. And unless you've got very clear indication that something's gone horribly wrong, say you see the tire tracks veer off to the right and somebody's car in the ditch, those tire tracks tell you something very important. They tell you that you're still on the road. Now, sometimes I think the tracks did drift around a little bit. I think there were parts where maybe it was running on the middle of the lane where the striped line would be. But for the most part, those tire tracks were fairly useful. That's your right lane there, is that you're in the tire tracks of tradition. And even if it's not the most perfect line in the world, uh, you know that that keeps you on the road because the people who were there in front of you, who laid down those tire tracks, well, they aren't there right now. They appear to be continuing to move. And um, then off into the left-hand lane, there's far fewer people driving there. You default to the right-hand lane. That's the appropriate and correct thing to do. And there's only reason to move over to the left lane, which is usually more snowy and doesn't have those nice, safe tracks for you to drive on, is because you want to pass somebody. Now, I did this. I did this on Tuesday night. It was unpleasant driving, but it's far from the worst winter driving that I've ever done. And so that's passing away from the tradition that's been given to you, the tradition that will probably get you to where you need to go, and that's passing over into innovation right there. And sometimes innovation is actually the right call. The person in front of you, uh, it might not be going nearly fast enough. It's unsafe to drive this slowly, at least in a vehicle my size, semi truck can get away with it. So you pass over from the safety of the tradition where you know where the tire tracks are, and you find yourself in an innovative space. Now, the thing that makes innovative space work, things that makes that left lane work, is you could still see the tire tracks off to your right. You still know where the car that you're passing is likely going to be. It's not like you're passing entirely into the unknown. It's still got a very stable reference towards what is known and what is proven over there. So you're not just making something up. You're not just going off entirely into the wild. You are still keeping an eye on what came before and trying something different. And it is more dangerous because there's snow on the ground there, and it's unproven there. And maybe the tradition will end up getting you off the road under those circumstances. That's an unfortunate risk that you may have to take. And then you go to the darkness on either side of the highway, and that's heresy. And don't go there because there's nothing good there. So uh, I mentioned as much. It was Bishop and I on this little road trip, and I mentioned as much to the bishop, and he seemed to agree. Uh, he is he is yeah. He seemed to think that the analogy that I had held water. So sharing it with you, and that's all I've got for my little opening rant. The tradition, while it may not be perfect, will get you to where you need to go. Hello, Father. I found your channel from Jacob Federecci. I'm a convert to the Catholic faith from Judaism. Hello, Gideon. Nice to meet you. And to anybody who's listening, anybody who wants to hop on, the StreamYard link is available. And I'm ready to talk kind of about whatever. If you liked what I had to say, if you got something else on your mind, we can talk about that. So yeah, winter's coming again. Thanksgiving is coming. Hope you're all ready to get things done. And you must be traveling, Mark.
I am. It's Thanksgiving time, That's when you travel.
Yeah, yeah. And if you're going up to the Northeast, you might run into some snow up there.
Heaven forfend, Father. We already got snow the last time we left. It snowed on my hand. I was very upset.
That's what you get for visiting home.
That's right.
Yeah, but it'll be below average. I watched a national weather forecast today. It looks like it's even going to be below average temperatures for South Carolina. So
Yeah, it's cold everywhere. Yeah, last night was miserable in South Carolina. No chance, sir. Sorry.
if it's a relation, it would be many centuries back. At that point, it's really not worth counting. So
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure all the Lefebvres or Lefebvres or however you pronounce it, based on where you are in France, are connected at some point. We're all related to Charlemagne. That's what I say. I liked your analogy, by the way. Quite good.
have you ever done that before? Stayed in the right lane?
Of course, I know all about this problem, and it is a problem. And yeah, staying in the tradition in the right lane doesn't always go as well as you'd like. Sometimes it just doesn't work, right? It's not a flaw. This is yeah. On the drive up to southern New Jersey here, where we landed, I was thinking a lot about this, just because you hear the way people talk, and it's just like, oh my goodness, this is so easy. You guys are just trying to perfect the world, and you're upset when it won't do that for you. And it's not supposed to. I don't know what to like. It's not supposed to do that. It's almost like we live in an imperfect world and we're imperfect creatures or something.
Yeah. Yeah. That's just how things work. Let's take a look at what we got going on in the comments here.
Oh, I haven't been paying
Thoughts
attention.
on the escalation in Russia? None whatsoever. I leave Russia to somebody else. I don't know anything about that. Just enough to know that I should be praying for the folks there. All right, so we've got a question about the particular Eucharistic prayer or preface. Fasting humbles sinful pride and gives God thanks. I get the first part, but how does fasting give God thanks? Yeah, I'd be interested in taking a look at the Latin there, from which we derive our English. But I think if you do some sort of appropriate asceticism, you'll be more properly disposed to have a correct order relationship to, let's say, the food. You decided you were going to eat less, or maybe not at all for a period of time, and that weakened your attachment to the food, and so now, you got the contrast to see what it's like now that I get to eat again. and hopefully it'll put you in a position to be more thankful. So that's the best I've got off the back of my head and off the top of my head. And if I could take a look at the Latin to see what it says, I might have a better idea. So it's a particular prayer from the Roman Missal he's referencing.
I mean, listen, all this time Rome has missiles and they've never fired them at anyone. And I'm thinking now's the time.
Yeah, yeah, they fired a Roman missile at the United States in 2010, and some people were upset because they had to change the words they were using. We went from "and also with you" to "and with your spirit." So
Yeah, that's a weird one. That's
the Latin is "et cum spiritu tuo." You don't really need to speak Latin to figure out what that means.
good because I failed Latin every
Yeah,
year I took it.
yeah,
At least I'm consistent.
yeah. That helps consistency. It's better than absolute chaos there.
Yeah, I think fasting helps you pay attention to here and now rather than far away and maybe future. I have a hard time paying attention to the future because I don't really know what's going to happen.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah.
Hey, Ron.
Hello, Ron. Hello, Ron. And I don't know anything about ice cold bourbon martinis. So,
Yeah, I just don't see the relevance. This is like the UFO thing, right? Like we're gonna find out the truth about the aliens. The truth is they've been real all along. Okay, so all the things I did in my life that didn't care because I didn't know can
mhm.
continue the way they continued before because we already did that and they were already quote real. So why is this interesting? What do you think the knowledge is going to change?
Yeah, yeah. It's it's kind of the test I run with any conspiracy theory is if everything this person I'm talking to, if everything he says is true, then what do I do with my life on that? And if the answer is, well, I have no power whatsoever over this, I can just safely ignore it because it doesn't have any effect on my life. Um,
Right, right.
so, to all
How can
the
it affect
Fatima
me?
conspiracy theory people, I will start to worry about that when I'm a cardinal at the Vatican.
There we go. That's the
Because
appropriate time.
maybe at that point I could start looking around for the full text of the Third Secret of Fatima. Right. But like before then, what would I do? What would I do with knowledge of the full text, the supposed full text of the Third Secret of Fatima? Would I continue to pray the Rosary? Yes, yes, I would. I would I go up to two rosaries? I guess that's possible, but I'm pretty sinful, and one seems to be about what I can handle. So yeah, that's and then like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do about intercontinental ballistic missiles?
Nothing. They're way bigger than you.
They're way bigger than me. They move so fast. I have no countermeasures against that.
Yeah. I don't know why people, this thing that's bigger than me might do a thing, and there's nothing you can do about that. But you can fast and pray and stuff. Maybe if that's all you can do, that's what you should do instead.
Hmm. Yeah. Yep. Yep. Just do what you can do, and don't try and do things that you can't do. So,
What is the slander against my good name, Father?
which slander?
I've been placed in the bucket of all.
Sorry, you are all traditional. Did not realize that.
I don't know what that means. I'm not even Catholic, so no. Ron's not even.
Yeah,
I don't. Where are we getting this from?
I'm not sure. If he wants to clarify, he can. And if not, then we can just move on because there's always something else to complain about.
Yeah, I think the problem with conspiracies is there's an infinite number of them, and there's a potential that they're actually all correct, even when they seem to conflict. And people don't get, like, they don't understand that. Like, a lot of things are true and true on many levels, and alternative explanations are also true because they're explanations. And so the fact that you can come up with 6 explanations for the same thing is not a conspiracy, and it's not interesting, and it's bigger than you.
All righty, we got that settled. It looks like we're gonna get a little bit of Ron here. See how he's doing. I haven't talked to him since like September, so
yeah,
it was
good to catch up.
And we've got Jess back.
Jess,
Father Eric, Mark. I just wanted to say hi.
Hey, Jess, good to see you. Even in black and white, still good.
That's his look. That's his thing.
That's his look now. Okay.
Yeah, trademark.
Did you trademark black and white? I think it's older than you are.
No, I trademarked it. I got it.
Cool. What's on your mind, Mark? Or Ron?
Well, first, just saying hello. Just kind of schlepping around.
All right.
And
all right.
what's the topic du jour?
I mean, I was talking about how when you're driving in a snowstorm, the tracks in front of you are tradition, and it may be helpful to pay attention to that. But like, it's the open mic. It's the open mic tonight. You know, the mic is open. Things will just kind of go in wherever they go, because this isn't nearly as dangerous as driving in a snowstorm, and so we can afford a little more experimentation.
So I got a question for you. If you're going, well, I don't want to interrupt. I can't see. I'm on my phone. Is it Joseph?
No, please, Jess. Jess
I've
is
never met
here.
you. It's good to meet you, Ron. I don't have anything to say.
He's in black and white. You can't take those people seriously.
Dude, you are so hip. Listen, I remember when black and white was on a TV that you had to wait to warm up.
Yeah.
Listen, and now it's hip again.
That's right.
But the day platform shoes come back and wide collars come back, I'm out. Don't care. It's demonic. I'm just saying.
Been there and done that, huh?
Yeah. So I got a question, and I don't know if there's going to be an answer, but I'll listen. I'm Protestant, Jewish, saved at a pot festival. Like, here I am, Saul to Paul. And the world I live in is Protestant. I have a very heavy Catholic leaning. And is there any legitimate history in the Protestant realm that you can see that's good? And I'll end it with this. I've been around a great lady, Dr. Mary Healy. Do you know her?
Oh, yeah, I had her at Sacred Heart for Intro to Old Testament.
Oh,
and she
really?
kept me awake in a 3-hour evening class, which is like that's skill right there.
Yeah, she's awesome. I've been around her and Father Matthias Thielen.
Know him too?
Yeah. And Dr. Randy Clark. These are some, I don't know if you know who he is. Okay, so Dr. Mary Healy said, I'll just run it by you. The Catholic Church prayed for the Holy Spirit at the end of the 1800s. There was a nun who presented a letter to the Pope saying, I believe you should pray for the Holy Spirit to fall on the church. And the Pope said, yeah, okay, I agree with this. End of the 1800s, the church was praying for the Holy Spirit to come, and it fell heavy in Azusa Street during the beginning of the 1900s.
In San Francisco, right?
Yeah,
the,
yeah.
Azusa Street revival. Yeah.
Yeah. And
All
she
right.
said
Well, That's an interpretation right there. Go on.
Well, and I'm asking you, she said there was a causal relationship. She believes that it was because of the prayer of the saints that God decided to use them. And I don't want to misquote her, but I believe I remember, well, I don't want to give her opinion because I'll just leave it at that. And just, she mentioned it and I'm like, I kind of see that. What do you think? I was radically changed in my heart by this charismatic movement. Like I really was Saul the Paul. So I'm not Catholic. I'm Catholic adjacent. Do you see anything in the Protestant world that has any history to it that you're not? That
Boy,
you can
I
at
mean, that's
least.
a big question right there. It's a big question. It might be useful for the listeners to know that Dr. Healy is a member of adjacent, affiliated with, associated with the Catholic Charismatic movement.
Yeah.
She's a part of the wing of that that forces begrudging respect out of me because of the moral character of their lives and the unfailing fidelity to the tradition and the church, the Catholic Church. And so I can't as much. It's not really my jive, the charismatic stuff there. But I'm kind of forced to respect it because it is doing a lot of good in the church, and I can't, I'm just not going to throw water on that. So that would be the sort of thing that I think of when I hear you report on what you heard her say. It's
Oh yeah,
that's an
and
interesting thing
I,
there.
yeah, and I want to be fair to her because you know she's great. Her and Father
Yeah.
Matthias Thielen, and I don't want to misrepresent her, but and I'm not saying that she was saying "Thus saith the Lord,"
Right,
or
right.
it was
Yeah.
just amusing, and I didn't know if you had any thoughts in general, like.
Yeah. There was something that Padre Pio said,
Mhm.
and somebody had asked him a similar question, and
Okay.
he's famous for pray, hope, and don't worry. Right, so that's kind of his attitude towards these things. That
What was that?
you
Can you
pray,
repeat?
hope, and don't worry.
Dude, I
Yeah,
love that.
yeah.
No,
It's
okay.
like you got to be a saint to come up with something that simple, right?
No, yeah, yeah.
Um, and somebody asked him basically the same thing, like, why is God allowing Protestantism to exist, basically?
Mhm. Mhm.
And the answer he gave was pretty curious. It's like, well, he's a Catholic priest, believes, along with the church, that the Catholic Church has the fullness of of the faith, and that doctrine he professes. That all of these different churches uh, that split off, all these different schisms that split off, and are able to maintain themselves over time. So not just something that splits off and blows up within a generation.
Yeah.
They're grabbing on to a piece of the whole doctrine, maybe a big chunk of it, maybe a small chunk of it. And the way he talked about it is that these groups end up polishing that up to a mirror shine because it's the one piece, and it's something good, something from
Mhm.
God, something
Okay.
that God sends His Holy Spirit down for people because He also loves Lutherans and things. It's not just Catholics,
Mm.
and I just have to acknowledge that. So. You can see that with the various branches or flavors of Protestantism there, and when I look at kind of the charismatic Pentecostal wing of things, the thing that
Mhm.
I really admire that they do is they're able to like really help people who are in trouble, and that sounds like that's exactly your story. There is there, um,
Yeah.
you were in
Here.
some kind of trouble, and those people were there to find you, and you know
Mhm.
I look at my beloved church and my beloved fellow Catholics in my area. I don't see as much of that happening. And if we had some, somewhat more Pentecostal types
Mhm.
come into the fold, they might have some ideas about how to run these things that makes, very orderly and organized me a little uncomfortable. But maybe that would actually be okay.
Why uncomfortable? If you don't mind me asking, I find it
Just
fascinating to talk with you because I like talking to people who don't agree with me, but can still have a dialogue.
yeah, I mean, temperamentally, you do a temperament test. I rank high in conscientiousness. I like
Oh,
things to be properly ordered.
okay.
And that's why I tend towards, really wanting to emphasize more traditional and, say, ritual, liturgical
Mhm.
orderliness, right? And like I feel like I'm really at home there. I've been to like some of the Catholic charismatic stuff, and I'm
Mhm.
just kind of like, okay, we're here for the youth, so I'm just gonna muscle through it, and I can see some of the good stuff that comes from it.
Right.
People go to it's like a Steubenville. They call them Steubenville conferences. It's put on by Franciscan
Yeah.
University in
Yeah.
Steubenville, and it's like, okay, there are people who really dig this, and
Mhm.
there are also people who they do this once and it's going to benefit them. And there's also
Right.
going to be people where it's all just going to be a flash in the pan or whatever, because nothing's 100% effective. Um, Nothing that we come up with anyway.
Can I share?
So,
Oh, go ahead, sir. Well, I
no, no,
got a
no, I
story.
was basically
Yeah,
finished. So,
I got something for you, and it's gonna make you laugh. All right. So I'm at a church in Muncie, Indiana, Catholic church. Uh, I go to the chapel often, and got the permission of the priest, and they'll like me, and I know what's going on and how to respect the place. And there was a girl named Mary there, uh, very sweet girl. She was a college student, and she wanted nothing to do with the charismatic stuff, and I respected her for it, and she was just very sweet. But we got along really well, and I talked to her a little bit about it. And then she went to an encounter ministry, um, which I think is very ordered and charismatic. And so, um, before she went there, we were cool, and she was kind of wondering what I was all about. She goes there, and she's been faithful in adoration for years. She goes to one of these encounter ministry meetings, and I think it was during adoration, like something hit her, like it wham.
and this would
And
have been just to paint the scene here. We would have had the Blessed Sacrament exposed, up on the altar, and they would have been playing praise and worship music the entire time in the background, and we would have Catholic smoke machines going.
exactly, yes. So, and she was in this. So what happened is that she made contact with God, and she comes back and she looks at me. She goes, "Ron, I get you now." And and then she decided to go into religious life, and that to me, man, that made my day. Um, it's I don't I don't live and die in the charismatic world to like make everyone charismatic. For me, it's more like part of the relationship with God. It's not a thing. It's a way of life. And I like it it when the presence of God comes into someone's life, either changes them radically in a good way, or opens up their heart more to God. And then they get happier, and then usually something pretty cool happens as well. So just wanted to share
Yeah,
that with
I
you.
and yeah, yeah, and I 100% believe that sort of thing. I will admit that the last Steubenville conference I went to did draw tears out of me. But
Okay.
I'm not much of a crier, but it did happen, and I have one of those kind of emotional connection with God kind of experiences right there. And even after having gone through that, and I think benefiting from it, the question remains in my mind: how
Mhm.
much of that was, let's say, caused by God, and how much
Yeah.
of that was occasioned by the music,
Right.
5,000 people in the
Mhm.
Civic Center,
Right.
smoke, all of
Mhm.
that. And the cool thing about doing it as a Catholic is we've got that focal point there. You've got
Mhm.
the Blessed
Sure.
Sacrament in the monstrance right there. And yeah, so I'm not saying that God wouldn't make use of such things,
Well,
but I think the perennial danger, and things come with perennial dangers all the time, is that people are going to confuse intense emotional experiences
right.
and saying that's always the Holy Spirit.
I like you're
Yeah.
talking to one of those guys who I think you would get along with pretty well because,
Mhm,
like, I ain't that guy. I'm
mhm.
absolutely, how do I put this? To make the supernatural natural, if that makes any sense at all, or unweird at least.
Well, I kind of like to keep the supernatural
Weird.
supernatural. Yeah,
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 yeah.
I like to
I,
keep it
all
weird.
right. Maybe I'm trying to smooth things over too much, but
Yeah.
because I've been in mega hyper charismatic where it was, I recognize the difference between spirit and emotion. They're both
Okay.
good.
Mhm.
So I guess that's what I'm saying is,
Yeah, yeah.
um, anyhow, before I go down, I don't want to hog the mics. This has been fun.
No,
So,
No, no,
that
no.
was
This is
great.
great. This is great. And me and Mark talk all the time, right? Like last week, it was
oh,
just the two of us. So having a few other friends here is nothing personal,
okay.
Mark, but it's nice.
Well,
He
do,
probably
do,
agrees.
here's the thing, like, and I don't know if I don't want to, I hope I'm not trying to name drop. Okay. Do you know Exodus 90?
Yeah.
Okay. Father Dorr is the priest, who wrote it. And
Mhm.
he was the priest I first met when I went to to the chapel at the church that's next to Ball State University. He's about the most uncharismatic guy you would ever want to meet. Dude, we got along great. I
Yeah.
I liked him so much. Like there's like I first get in there like I'm Protestant. I'm walking in this Catholic church. I'm like, it's Belfast. I'm gonna die, but I'm like, I know. Talk to the priest because they'll, like you need to go to the hierarchy and just introduce yourself. I'm like, hey, I'm Ron. Can I be here? And he's like, real cool, yeah. And I go, listen, uh, sometimes I pray for people for healing. And I was like, I thought I was gonna get booted out. And I go, is that okay? And he goes, yeah, just ask for permission first.
Yeah.
After that, it was he was all about it. And he was it's funny, he's one of the kinder dudes I've been around, and I would trust him with $1 million. And just like, here, Father, just go carry this across town and I'll give you a box of cigars and some scotch or whatever. Forget what he's like. It's either scotch or what do you guys like to drink? It's either
It's different for all of them.
But we're,
They're all
we're
people
all
or
the
something.
same, huh?
yes, it's
Like
just yes, you
maybe
are.
some of
You
us
all
like
look the
scotch.
same. You all have the
Yeah,
collar, so it's got to be the
yeah.
same.
It's got to be the same.
Some of
That,
us like wine coolers. All right, it's fine.
Father, did you see Pageau's video? I think it actually came out today because I'm driving. So I was like, oh, I'm all about this. About Tucker Carlson's little experience there.
Hmm.
No, I have not seen that. But Tucker Carlson was talking about being attacked by a demon or something like that.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, it was interesting. I mean, look, in my opinion, he advertised and didn't deliver, but that's a minor thing. I actually had a lot of insights from listening to him talk about this. He's never talked about that sort of thing in that way before.
Tucker or Jonathan
Pageau?
Pageau?
Pageau.
Okay.
Well, Tucker too, but who cares?
Hmm.
Whatever. I'm not interested in Tucker. He's a person who had a thing. Fine.
Yeah.
People have things all the time. That's the most minor story I've ever heard from somebody who never had an experience and then had one, to be quite honest. But we don't want to go into that because I'll lose all
Maybe we
credibility.
could be
with
grateful.
everybody.
Maybe we could be grateful that that's the case, right? 'Cause
Mark, are you
not
holding out
everybody-
on us?
No, you have no idea, Jess. You have no idea whatsoever.
Dude, I would love to spend the evening talking to you about that.
Well, next time we all gather in Arkansas,
Gather
for
around the
poetry,
campfire.
we can do that. So, yeah. No, I was interesting because one of the things he was talking about was just because there's a miracle doesn't mean there aren't mechanical causes involved. And I thought that was really interesting, right? Because he's talking about there was a church
Mm.
and Virgin Mary was crying and it was red water coming down her cheeks, looked like crying. And then, of course, they found a hole and they were like, yeah, there's a hole and there's a rusty pipe and that's what made the water red. And he, of course, he flips it over and says, like, what are the odds that all those things come together and that the amount of water that drips is just enough,
Mhm.
right? And it doesn't happen all the time. So it doesn't look like right. And if you did the statistics on that, it's impossible. Basically, and he was like, "Yes, this is still a miracle, right?" And so that I just found that interesting because, it sort of debunks the materialist idea that we have a material explanation and therefore this is nothing special. And it's like, no. Actually, generally, the materialist explanation proves that it's something special
Mhm.
because the materialist explanation relies on all these wacky statistics that basically say this can't happen. Right, or can't happen often enough that you'd ever see it more than once or something, and of course you do. And so I just found that interesting. It's a good talk. Everybody should listen to that talk. I found it rather fascinating, just because it's along the lines of the more charismatic stuff, we'll say.
Mhm.
I mean, I had this thought a long time ago. I was thinking about Joshua and the Israelites marching around the city of Jericho, right? And like, imagine if it was the case that after 7 days of marching around the city, and after the seventh time on the seventh day they march around the city, there's a huge earthquake that knocks the walls down.
Right
And
as
that
they
God-
shout.
Yeah, right as they shout, right? It's like, okay, maybe if you had all of the best tectonics equipment in the world, you could have seen this earthquake coming, 200,000 years before time. But what are the stinking odds that it's going to work out like that?
Right,
Like
right.
basically 0% right there. Nobody can really plan these sorts of things. And that sounds like the similar sort of thing. I don't want to exclude the fact that some miracles do have entirely supernatural causes. Run away from that and act like I'm afraid of it. But if you at a certain point want to draw a distinction between supernatural miracles and what? Because a miracle, right? It's a mira, right? A wonder, a thing for wonder. That's where the word miracle comes from. Mirabilus, wonderful things. And if there's something good that happens, that's, let's say, a little bit unexpected, and you notice it, that can also just be a miracle, even if it's, let's say, entirely within God's providence and the natural order of secondary causality and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. I mean, I buy it. I guess. But sometimes the sun dances in the sky. So,
Just to go back with what Ron was saying for a second, because I grew up in a Nazarene church, and so the Nazarene denomination comes out of the Azusa Street revival, and my church wasn't especially charismatic, but those are the roots. Charismatic in practice, they're charismatic in ideas, but as far as practice, it wasn't necessarily a wild place. It was a bunch. there are many farmers from Idaho there. Like they weren't necessarily dancing in the aisles, but after I grew up, like I went to more sort of spectacle type churches of, some are more than others. And then, so I kind of had a experience of that. And then even the missions organization that I worked with, was very, much, like a common thing to do would be led by you'd want to be led by the Holy Spirit in the task that you're doing. And you would pray and you would ask God to lead you, and you would, as a group, you would get answers and you go do stuff, and things would happen, so it's just interesting here you talk about that. But like a couple weeks ago, I just want to tell you guys this. Yosef like messaged me and was like, hey, you got to check out this podcast. They're going through this book, and this week they're talking about a chapter, and it's about Job. So go like jump on if you want. And I was like, I never jump on random streams. But I just jumped on this guy's stream, and it's a couple ortho bros, nice guys, but ended up sort of telling him what I just told you about my background or whatever. And then he goes on, he comes out of, I think he comes out of the Wesleyan church. And so he's Orthodox, been Orthodox with his family now for 10 years or something. And then he goes on to tell me this like long, fascinating story about how John Wesley, who's an Anglican in England, before he goes to America and starts the Wesleyan church, he gets baptized by a bishop of the Eastern Orthodox Church. And the whole, like his since we're talking conspiracy theories, his conspiracy theory is that Wesley, you're not allowed to be a different, if you're going to be a practicing priest, you have to be Anglican if you're in England, because it's the state church. And they didn't have Eastern Orthodox churches, but there was this Eastern Orthodox bishop that was exiled because there was problems going on out east. And he had was it confirmed, or what's it when you
Chrismated.
Yeah, he selected some guys and anointed them as bishop or as priests.
Oh, okay. So he ordained them.
Ordained, that's the word. Sorry.
Yeah.
So he ordains possibly John Wesley as a Orthodox priest, and it's possible that John Wesley sort of understands the importance of this, and he maintains his cover as an Anglican priest. But then the story does kind of fall apart, because when he goes to America, he starts ordaining his own priest, which he's not allowed to do as a priest of the church. So we could get that Protestant fragmentation that happened when when Luther starts ordaining priests. But anyway, Azusa Street, all that kind of has roots in Wesley, and he, well,
Really,
this guy who converted from West, being a Wesleyan to Eastern Orthodoxy, he was very excited about that, because he found this like through line that comes through all the way through his history. And then he told me that, and I think it's hilarious, or I think it's fun.
well, can you tell me a little bit? Because I didn't know about. But now, Wesley, what year was Wesley?
That was 18th century, right?
Okay.
I think so.
Yeah.
I don't remember my dates.
He wrote a lot of absolute banger church hymns.
And I guess the Wesleyan theology, according to my newfound friend, is very close, or it has lots of Orthodox stuff about it. So it's very Orthodox in its theology, and so
a lot of
but it's interesting that the charismatic movement comes out of that, since the Eastern Orthodox Church has hesychasm and all that, which is people have made the observation that there's some sort of loose connection. The Eastern Orthodox are much more organized and sort of disciplined than the charismatics can get off into left field very easily.
Oh, dude. we're confetti in the wind. That's one thing that does bother me. I mean,
Yeah.
I steal all my good stuff from the Catholics, or at least a lot of it, and the Orthodox. So
Yeah,
sorry, but
you
yeah.
gotta well, you gotta like ground yourself in some sort of tradition. Because I grew up in it, and I don't
Mhm.
do that stuff now in my adult life. I did it well into my 20s. You know, I, I I wasn't a very
What do you?
charismatic person, but I like those environments, and now I'm a little bit kind of, you know, gun shy or whatever. I don't know. I'm fine with them. I don't want to participate in them. I don't want to feel pressured to do speaking in tongues or being slain in the spirit, like any of that stuff. Like I'm just like sort of been there, done that, because like I did feel the
Mhm.
tension between like as I like went outside that world, like I needed
Mhm.
something else. Like I needed to strengthen my own human reasoning. I needed to ground myself in some sort of theological traditions. I needed to other stuff other than, you know, the
Sure.
experience of the
I,
service or the spirit.
I guess I'm not going to push back on it, but I guess I would amend it. It like in my case, it's been 24 years. It was November, second week November 1999, about 2:30 in the afternoon, and whammo, like detonation. It hasn't stopped since. It's changed and matured. And to be honest with you, it's what keeps me through the crazy of my life. And I see value in it for me. And I try to get other people to recognize the charismatic in their own life that they might not even understand is occurring,
Mhm.
and then get them grounded in something very solid so that they don't get wing nutty. I
I mean, that's kind of my dream, right? Is like I want the charismatics to be like the oh gosh, what would be the appropriate sort of the dragnet for the Catholic Church, right? You know, and you just go out
yeah,
there
It's the
and you
front
do it.
line.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you do exactly what the Lord told you to do.
yeah,
Throw out
okay,
and pull in
yeah,
all the fish, and like
right,
we'll sort them out later. You know,
Mhm.
yeah, yeah.
it,
No,
it
I
was
like
Jesus
that.
who spoke about that. And then it would be nice because it's like you've got the
Mhm.
hyper, stable, definitely not confetti in the wind types like me, and we'll sit in front of the desk and answer the emails, right? And
Right,
you know,
right,
we'll reserve the convention center. We'll make sure that the AV equipment gets set up. We'll have the
right.
Yeah.
caterers lined up, and we'll have volunteers to help people with their name badges and then kind of the more confetti of the wind type can like just go out there and
Well,
be a little more comfortable with all the and it'd be a beautiful thing, beautiful thing
right.
anytime now. Um,
Anytime.
So
Well, oh, go ahead, Jess.
well, I like so I was like, what's like some Wesleyan theology or whatever. So I was looking up some stuff and I came across the Wesleyan quadrangle, and it's the framework. Here's a framework for understanding Christian beliefs and practices. This is how Wesley described it. So he says scripture, tradition,
Hmm,
reason, and experience.
hmm.
And Wesley's kind of unique in the Protestant world, especially in American Protestantism, because basically a lot of American Protestant denominations do scripture, tradition, and reason, and there's no experience. Like there
Oh,
are Protestant
oh, okay.
denominations. I didn't even realize this till I looked this up. There are Protestant denominations that automatically distrust
Yep.
experience at least, and there's some that say it's actually demonic. A good
Yeah,
experience or a bad experience you should take
Baptist.
as Satan tempting you. Like they're
wow,
explicit about it. It's a little
dude.
bit on the extreme side, but Wesley was kind of unique in that he put that in that stack, and it's kind of a stack: scripture first, tradition then next, then reason, then
Hmm.
experience. So you even see Wesley like using reason and experience to balance each other out.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's probably
okay.
someone's. He drew it as a a quadrangle, like so sides of.
Oh, okay, okay.
I don't know why he
Let's
calls it a quadrangle.
Yeah.
Oh, but it comes out. It might come out of some aspect of Methodism, because Wesley comes out of the Methodist Church. If you can follow the Protestant tree.
But I mean, this for me is
Okay.
like weird, right? Because
Mhm.
a lot of people don't understand all the little splinter groups that are Protestant denominations or whatever. All those elements are in the Catholic Church
No, I
somewhere,
know.
right? That's what cracks me up. Which goes back to Ron's sort of like, what do they have that's good? Well, they've got some really good implementations, right? But
Yeah.
what do they have tradition wise that's good? As near as I can tell, there are no lasting traditions in any of the denominations, right? That just seems like to be what it is. They keep changing it and saying, well, it's drawn from this tradition. It's like, yeah, but it changes awful fast, right?
Yeah,
then is it a tradition, right? That's the question.
I've heard someone describe it like what kind of characterizes Protestantism is they sort of latch onto something that they claim has been forgotten since the first century, and then they claim that that's the main thing, and then they call themselves that. So it's the Baptists or the Methodists or the whatever.
I never knew.
So like even the charismatics, they'll say, especially there's Pentecostal groups that'll be like, we are following in the footsteps of those who were anointed with the Holy Spirit at Pentecost. And it's like they lost that, and now we've got it now, and we're the apostles.
I got you.
It gets wild.
Right.
This is really interesting to me.
Yeah, it's interesting to me too. I don't even know why, but it's really interesting to me.
Because like reason and experience, like the ordering's okay, right? I tend to scripture and tradition, like they've got a really interesting interaction with each other, and how it actually all plays out. And then like reason and experience, like yeah, they're there, but like they're really not the most important part. So this is like kind of correct, but like also just interesting. I don't know. I guess if you just need something really quick and easy to onboard people.
Yeah, I mean, I think Wesley would say, and well, this is how I would see things probably too, is that you have to have some sort of understanding of God that makes sense. It can't be arbitrary. It can't be like there's some stuff you can sort of say like it's sort of beyond me and just sort of be at peace with that.
There are mysteries, yeah.
Like it cannot have so many contradictions that it violates your reason, basically.
Right.
And then so that's but then with experience, I think everyone would need an experience with God somehow.
Yeah, I guess that'd be like where the sacraments would come in, because that's how.
Right. At whatever level God meets you, and whatever level you actually need, is like it's a very personal thing. Like, and you can't necessarily subscribe one thing for another and say, oh, you haven't experienced God because you've only done this and this and this, and I've spoken in tongues and laid on the ground and flopped like a fish or whatever.
But Jess, you can see how, right? It's theology, ontology. They're all ologies, right? In other words, they're all basically categorizations, right? And so they're automatically limited. Plato actually went over this. The Republic. I have a video coming out about that, by the way. But and this is the problem. Like you put it in a system like that where there aren't overlaps. It's hierarchical. But at the same time, you're rejecting a hierarchy of experience, which says, hey, maybe you had an experience with the Holy Spirit, maybe you had an experience with an angel, maybe you had experience with, right, go on and on and on and on and on. But it wasn't directly with God, because that's like Noah, dude. And you're not Noah. It's not that hard, right? It's not that hard. But you see what I mean? Like on the one hand, they're like, oh, we're all about hierarchy, until it's hierarchy in the ethereal realm. And then they want to squish the hierarchy in the ethereal realm down to all experience is an experience with God. And it's like, well, but now you don't get a sense. I mean, this I would argue is partly because of the John side. You don't get a sense for where you sit in that. And I think conspiracy is related to this too, right? Because what you're doing with conspiracy is you're trying to draw things together, we'll say in logic, reason, and rationality. And then you can do that any number of ways with ethereal things because they're abstract. So that's what I was saying. Like, you could have an infinite number of conspiracy theories about the same thing, and none of them could be wrong. That's quite possible mathematically, even, which just blows my mind. Why? But the fact that you go after conspiracy, what that means is that you're trying to explain away miracle as such, and that's where I have a problem. Like, you don't do that. Just have the experience, privilege the experience, because that's the, let's call it the experience with the ethereal, right? Privilege that, right? And then bring that in and process it with logic, reason, rationality, and bow to the tradition, right? And the problem with scripture is that you're stuck in the, what I call the age of gnosis, the propositional tyranny, right? Because you run into an interpretation problem, which is multi-level, right? Who interpreted the text you're reading? We're already screwed, right?
Right.
Then I interpreted what that text says. Now you're screwed more because you can't even do that, right? And then I'm interpreting my experience within that frame. This makes no sense, right? It's purely self-referential. It's all you. It never gets out of you. It never allows the thing to emanate down upon you. And then for you to process it with, you need a distributed cognition, which is other people, right? If you want to stay in Verviki land for a bit with me, that is where things like tradition and the hierarchy come in, right? And then there's a whole hierarchy to that experience, up to including in the Catholic tradition, like exorcists and stuff, right? Because ethereal encounters are not only positive.
For sure.
Super random question.
Okay.
Do you think like there's only one correct interpretation for scripture, or like is it, like
I mean,
there's a
we've
panoply
got
of
we've got four senses of scripture already, so there's obviously not going to be one correct interpretation. And so let's imagine somebody's praying with the text, and Israel came out from Egypt from the Psalms, right? And they recall, the literal meaning of the term. The nation of Israel was drawn out of Egypt, right? They've got the moral version of that. We are called from sin into goodness. The anagogical version of that, this world, the faithful from this world will be delivered into the perfect paradise of God. And the allegorical, Christ is the one who leads us out of Egypt. And then there's also like a personal application to it, right? Where they start to think, man, a year ago I was a mess. I was living a totally dissolute lifestyle, and I've been led out of that by Jesus. That's 5 equally valid but not equal interpretations, because your personal application of that to you is probably very good for you, but it doesn't have much to do with me. Whereas the classical senses of scripture can include everybody, basically. So yeah, there's a lot of, we'll say, there's a lot of correct interpretations, but not all interpretations are correct. There we go.
Yeah, and sometimes the personal, you can tell your personal interpretation and how it helped you, and it will actually help someone else understand the theological or the higher levels of it, because they couldn't grasp it at some point. And so, like, you, by sharing your personal, can actually, like, they all will interact. There's mediations between those.
But that has to be true for all, quote, deep texts. So when people talk about the deep texts, like even Plato's Republic, right? The reason why you can go back and get more is because there's more there, and the text is bigger than you. And so I think people are confused about interpretation. Interpretation relies on framing, right? And it's affected by your perspective, which relies on your framing. And your framing changes because you change, right? Hopefully, right? And the world changes. And so the things you see in the world also change. So all of that affects your ability to interpret, and it affects which interpretation you come up with. So the idea that a text is like a static thing that has a single, we'll call them linear and discrete relationship, to your knowledge or your information or what you get out of it doesn't actually make any sense at all. And it's not just the Bible; it's also any deep, interesting work, whether it's another wisdom text or whether it's Plato's Republic or whether it's Solzhenitsyn or Tolstoy or any number of these authors that or Moby Dick, better yet. See the Moby Dick book club; it's wonderful. That's the thing. Like it wouldn't be helpful if there were one interpretation. It would actually break the world.
It would be a lesser text if there was one
So
interpretation.
like, why do you stop at like 4 frames? Like,
Because that's what the church has given me.
I love it.
But that doesn't 4 frames doesn't mean 4 interpretations, because your interpretation in each frame can change based on the interaction with the other frames. And again, was it Epictetus? You don't step in the same river twice, because the river changes and you change, which everybody leaves out. But that's actually the important part. Like you can't stop the river and the trick stops working. The trick still works because you're still different, even if the river isn't, right? Everything's moving, What's
really interesting is when the church, the magisterial authority of the church is doing its work, it rarely ever gives a definitive interpretation for any particular passage. It prefers to play with the doctrine, right? If anyone should say that this, that, or the other thing, which may not have any biblical language in it whatsoever, let it be anathema. That's very different than saying, Exodus chapter 14 refers to exactly and only this, and the church doesn't do that very often. So that's just a thing to pay attention to. It makes things more complicated, but if your religion's too simple, it's not gonna be fitting for your life, because your life isn't simple and the world isn't simple. So you need an equally complex and textured religion to go along with it. And that's what I think, Andrew.
let's go.
And that's the absolute truth.
You got
Going
any
back
more
to what you-
questions, or
No,
is that it?
I'm pretty much out.
Okay, cool.
Going back to what you were talking about, Mark, about when I brought up the quadrangle, I still don't quite like what's your point of disagreement? Like, I don't even know if you're in disagreement with it. What were you saying?
it's totally wrong and ridiculous, but that's
It's totally wrong and ridiculous. Okay.
Yeah, everything about it is completely ridiculous, but that's fine.
Okay.
We're attracted to order.
What-
We should be, and we're pattern finding machines, and so we find patterns. And when we find patterns that we like, we go after them, right? And we call it beauty and say beauty is good, which it is not. It's true, good, and beautiful are separate, right? And then we fall down that rabbit hole. But the problem for me is that a lot of things work more like Venn diagrams if you make them spheres instead of circles. Then that fixes everything. You make a Venn diagram into a bunch of spheres instead of a bunch of circles, and actually now it actually maps to life so much better that your accuracy rating goes through the roof. The problem is you have very many more factors to consider. This is actually what I've been thinking about on the drive up to what turned out to be New Jersey. Who knew I'd be in New Jersey, but I am. So Peterson talks about this as a multivariate equation, which is technically correct, by the way. I'm quite familiar with this. But it's worse because what they do in things like calculus is they do a bunch of assumptions and rounding, and so which again takes the miracle out, right? Because you end up with very strange results. Like one of my favorites is I think this is it David Gardner, maybe? It's one of those math guys, but he basically says circles don't exist. Let me prove this to you. A circle is an infinite number of points, and geometrically, mathematically, points don't exist, and therefore circles don't exist. I'm like, I love that. Right. That's fair. Right. Well, but look at it this way. Circles are a miracle. No, bang, I just re-enchanted the world. Bang, right?
Mhm.
Just like that. But now, are you going to get the depth of that right away? Probably not. Fair enough. Like, it takes a while to sort of realize how cool it is that you can just, take away logic, reason, and rationality for a minute and get an experience of the world that you can't have when your logic, reason, and rationality are on.
Right.
And
It's the same problem when you have two distance between stepping stones. To go from one stepping stone to the other, you got to go first halfway. And then in order
Right.
to go from there to there, you still got to go halfway that distance. And then from go there to there, you have to go that halfway distance. And then you have to go half that distance, and you have to go half that distance. And it's an infinite number of half distances. And you never make it to the next stepping stone unless you just step and then you're there.
Well, that's the famous Greek paradox. I think it's
Right.
Meno's.
Right.
But the way he does it is if I remember, the way I've heard it that I like the most is you can't touch a wall. You can't come in physical contact with a wall. And I think that the way to understand these, quote, paradoxes or contradictions is when you meet a contradiction or a paradox, you have met the limit of the worldview that you're stuck in. And that's okay. Like, you're not going to have a worldview that isn't stuck. That's not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
You're just a limited creature and you can't do it. Sorry. This is like, you can't interpret the Bible because you're just one guy. The Bible's this distributed cognition through 2,000 years of written history. Who knows how much oral history, right? Maybe 100,000 years of smart people, right? And it's not perfect because it turns out, I don't know if you're ready for this, Judge. You sitting down? Yeah, we're not perfect. And so it's like the interpreters of whatever, the Holy Spirit, God's word, including Moses, right? They're not perfect, and therefore their interpretations are perfect, and therefore we're constantly adjusting. And we're going to stay there forever, by the way, until whatever happens, right? Which is fine. But what that means for me is that the ancient Greeks knew, well, paradox means limitation, and all logical systems will end with a paradox. And you can't resolve anything anything at all, anything. I think this is clear from the Republic, which is why I'm puzzled why people go, I read the Republic and it was great. And it and we're going to do this philosophy. And I'm like, I don't think you understood Plato at all, even a little bit. Like, I think you missed all the best parts of the book, right? Because he seems to be saying, there's all this stuff we can't account for. And we just say, yeah, the gods say this. And Plato's Republic is full of references to the gods. Chocked full. It's amazing. They're like every third page. I'm like, what is going on? And they always happen when he reaches a logical conundrum or a logical
there's a god there.
self-reference, or whenever logic fails him. The character of Socrates in Plato's Republic says, well, Zeus, well, Athena, well, whatever, whatever random pagan god he needs to plug the hole.
Threshold guardian.
Right. So what I'm saying is you use the paradoxes to find the limits of your thought, right? And then you realize that obviously the world isn't that way, and therefore logic, reason, rationality they can't encompass the doesn't there's no problem with that. It's not to say they're not useful in the world, right? It's just like they're not the whole picture. This is fair. They're not the whole picture. They weren't the whole picture for the so-called philosophers, right? They weren't. Like, this is explicit in the text. And so that can help you to get out of, right? You hit the paradox, whatever paradox, Meno's paradox, maybe whatever, it doesn't matter. And you realize I can touch the wall, and you go, that's a miracle. Bang, right? Because it doesn't fit in logic, reason, and rationality. And now all of a sudden, a bunch of things are miracles. And if you can appreciate that, you can have gratitude for it. Right?
My dad would tell me this joke. There's a mathematician and an engineer. I'll try to make this joke appropriate for the channel. There's a mathematician and an engineer, and across the room there's a beautiful woman, and they're like every minute they can cross half the distance between them and the woman, and then it's the same thing I was talking about. And then after another minute, you can cross half the distance, and the mathematician is just like, what's the point? Like, well, I'll never reach her. And then the engineer is like giddy, and the mathematician is like, what are you happy about? And the engineer says, well, I can get close enough for all practical purposes.
Yes. Yes. Well, don't tell Andrew that he thinks circles are real and they're not, because that can be very disturbing for an architecture student to find out circles are in fact not real at all. That's rough, man. Sorry to break it to you.
But approximations of circles are real.
Well, that's the trick they play, right? To tell you that math maps to the real world is they just I've actually studied this quite a bit and talked to people at like MIT and places like that about it, right? Like, yeah, every time they do that, they use an approximation, and then they go, see, it maps to the world, and I go, bro, you used an approximation. Like, what are you talking about, right? And they don't. It's weird. I mean, some of the very honest physicists will admit this, right?
Mm-hmm.
You or I or Jess or who knows can in physics pass through 3-foot sticks steel without any harm to your body. You can pass right through it. Bang. There's nothing in physics preventing that, right?
Just statistics.
Except the statistics. Well, but here's the rub, right? Once the numbers get sufficiently large, and it's, infinite is fine. If you want to use their crazy abstractions against them, you just say, well, infinite, right? And with infinite time and an infinite number of tries, right? Then it happens all the time. Oops, right? And then that's where everything flips. And you go, well, this math does not map to my experience anymore. So now what good is this math? Right. And that's actually the point. And some of them know this. Some of them are well aware of this, and we'll talk about this. And
is the
most
problem
of
in
them
the
actually
infinite?
don't know.
The problem's in postulating the infinite.
Well, the problem is that I think this is another Gardner book too. There's a book about infinity, or there's an article about infinity where it postulates. I wish I had all this stuff. It all got stolen. It postulates a hotel with an infinite number of rooms and what you could do to accommodate different groups of different sizes coming in, including infinite groups, because you can move the rooms around in all sorts of weird, unintuitive ways once you posit infinity, right? But A, infinity is an approximation and it's cop out, right? And B, you can't actually do any of that. Like it's completely useless because that hotel cannot exist for us, at least not here and now. So it's kind of like, well, and it's a fun, like I love that stuff. It's actually fun. But it causes a problem in that, right? Because what it means is that math, and the mathematicians damn well know this, doesn't map to reality. There's all kinds of approximations going on, and all those approximations are actually just miracles.
But there are, for all practical purposes, practical circles.
Yes.
I think that's about right.
I forget where that is. I don't know if it's an article. Oh, it's Martin Gardner, I think. Yeah, I don't know if it's a Martin Gardner article or in one of his books or something, or I don't think it's in Flatland. But I don't have any of those books, so I don't think I have a copy of Flatland anymore. Although maybe it's in the shed somewhere. But yeah, there's some neat math things that you can sort of get into, which is ironic because I can't do any math myself, so I just know all these neat math things.
Yeah. Well, the infinity stuff ends up so weird. You realize that quantitative infinity is actually just impossible.
Yep.
Yeah, it doesn't exist. It can't exist.
It can't exist because
it breaks quantity. I mean, that's literally infinity is the breaking of quantity and the destruction of measure as such. And that's what the hotel thing proves. Like, measure's pointless. Hotel room numbers are ridiculous in a world with infinity. They just don't make any sense. And the number of times that the math people and the physics people use infinity will shock you once you realize, wait a minute, this isn't even a real thing. Why are they using this? Well, because they're trying to get around something they can't explain. Well, if it's something you can't explain, it's a miracle. That's bang, done, solved, fixed.
Yeah. And then you can be happy and not be a mathematician.
Yes. I think Sally Joe's first comment, or not her first comment, yeah, more information will not help. Exactly. The deeper you dig into math, the more you realize this isn't going to help. There's a point at which it helps, and there's a point at which that it degrades and the helping goes away, as with
Yeah,
all
yeah.
sciences.
But it's the trouble is that the point of which that becomes the case isn't something that you can just turn into a procedure, turn into a rule. It's something that requires good old fashioned wisdom to be able to say, okay, this computer model isn't helpful anymore.
Yeah.
I'm just going to go and make a decision based on it. So, yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. They do. Well, they're playing at the edges of what math can do. And then those guys are usually the ones that know full well, yeah, this has limits, and there's a bunch of stuff that doesn't map to reality, and so we use rounding and estimates and magic variables, cosmological constants, use all kinds of stuff,
That was the
infinity.
thing that bothered me the most about a 20-minute YouTube video I watched on the standard model of physics. And there was just this part that's just like, hey, here's this variable, and we know that things don't quite work properly. So
Yep.
we just have this variable in there for all that squishy stuff that we can't explain. And it's like, okay, this is the standard model. This is the best that physics has to offer. We
Right.
haven't come up with anything better in 60 years. All right.
And there probably
Yeah.
isn't anything better. And there's worse stuff. Like, I think it's, I do think it's actually 7 constants can describe almost everything in the universe, which I don't know where that number came from, but also they came up with it, not me. It's like, it seems like somebody knew that way before them and actually wrote it down, but they didn't read the book or something. But yeah. I've seen Numberphile, by the way. Yeah, Numberphile is an interesting. But that's the thing. Like, it's better to have the miracle there. It's better to keep the conspiracy out and stop trying to tie everything together, because to Jess's point, I like the second version of your story better, right? For
Yeah, it
all
is nice.
practical purposes. It's
Yeah,
like,
I like the mathematicians all depressed and the engineers like, we can do this.
well, he's going to find a way.
Yeah, the engineer knows. You just gotta. The engineer's actually interacting with reality. The mathematician's stuck in his head.
Right. Well, and like on one hand, it's funny. On the other hand, I'm laughing at actual people I know at actual MIT or who used to be at MIT, like, because that's, in a way, it's sad and not funny, because and at MIT you could see that interaction happen. Not with that particular example, but
Right.
also
But
with that particular example. Like, this is a real thing that happens to real people at real MIT for real, and it's just so sad. There's so many of those tropes, and you're like, I've seen that.
Right.
It's this book that you turned me on to, Mark, The Geography of Thought. And, not to get too deep into that, but it's like there's this tendency in Western people. It's statistically measurable with a number of experiments, right? So it's as good as psychology is going to get. It's basically like there's this tendency for Westerners, especially British and Northern European descent, to rely too much on logic, to rely too much on reason, rationality, abstract principles, universally applicable rules, and focus on categorization. And he blames it on the Greeks, and that's like the part of the book that I disagree with the most, where he's like, this is a misunderstanding of Plato and Aristotle.
It's the Romans. They're just look at Latin. It's definitely the Romans.
Okay, alrighty. Which is why the Romans were at their best with law and engineering.
Exactly.
Because you have to be connected to reality to do those two things.
Law, engineering, and governance.
Yeah.
I mean, but they revered the Greeks and tried to keep the Greeks sort of on their own, and of course they couldn't do it. So Rome was then like, all right, we'll go over there and conquer you because we don't want to, but we have no choice, right? But it's not until you reintroduce the miracle, right? Jerusalem. So you've got Rome, Athens, and Jerusalem, right? That things really start to get rolling, right? And that's
Mhm.
and that's where the whole world unfolds, right? And then you get and people seem to just never understand this for some reason. Render unto Caesar means like you have to cooperate with Caesar. Like I don't. Everybody seems to think it means something else, and I'm like, it means a lot of things, but it also means you have to cooperate with Caesar. You're not supposed to like not cooperate with Caesar. Right? Now, how you do that and when you do that is a different story, but you're not supposed to just resist government as such, right? You're actually supposed to conform to government. Like,
Mhm.
that's what that means, partially.
I mean,
Mhm.
it's actually really simple. Is that you obey all just laws, and you also obey unjust laws if they're not gravely unjust.
Otherwise, you jump in front of lions and you suck it up because Christians are for lions. Not
Yeah.
hard.
It's not hard.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
Oh, Father, I have a question for you.
Oh my.
So I was listening to oh shoot, what's that? Universal History. So I missed the last one, but I was listening to it in the car, of course, because I got lots of time driving 10 hours. They were talking about the three types of martyrdom. And I was just like, what is this? This is fascinating. I've never heard
Yeah.
about
Was it
this.
like the red martyrdom, the white
Yep.
martyrdom, and the green
The
martyrdom?
green martyrdom.
Have you
Yeah.
heard about that, Father Eric?
I mean, I've heard of red and white. Green must be an Orthodox color. So red, it's blood. You shed your blood for Christ. White martyrdom, my understanding of that is, all of a sudden Constantine rolls in, and Christians just aren't getting martyred like they used to. But you still want to be like really holy, like a martyr. So what you do is you just go out into a monastery and live as intense and holy a life as you can manage, and that's actually as good as martyrdom, as it turns out. But this green martyrdom business, that's new to me. I've never heard that.
It's from the
It might
Irish.
the Irish is that
Yeah.
is that like I heard that the Irish monks would do exile as a penance, and that's actually like how they evangelized a bunch of the Germanic and Frankish tribes was they would just exile themselves from Ireland, go somewhere and convert a bunch of people by their holiness. So
It
yeah,
sounds like what you were just talking about with white martyrdom, but
Climate change martyrdom.
what would the
so
like I
so
just
is
Googled-
white martyrdom the way they refer to confessors? That'd be interesting.
Oh, now you have homework, Father, for next week.
I guess, yeah. Unless Jess could just Google this and clear it up for us right now.
No, you gotta do your research on this. I gotta understand this. This is fascinating to me because I got my whole thing about how martyrdom works, and I don't know how that fits in with what Pageau was saying. And so now I'm like, wait a minute, what's going on here?
they're new to being martyrs. It's just the new recruits.
The
new
wet behind the ears martyrs.
They've only done it. They haven't even done it once yet, and so they're green. Yes.
They've only done it once.
I'm glad that water stayed in my mouth.
That was
Otherwise, my laptop would be a blue martyr.
sorry, Father. But it just
Blue
I was
screen
like,
of
yeah,
death.
it totally makes sense. They've only, they haven't even done it once. They're green.
Sure. So it's like these are Eastern categories, and we can still practice the same religion and categorize things differently. I'm accustomed to you got martyrs, you got confessors, and then you've got kind of everybody else. So
But what
martyr is
what are the martyrs? Like how
Yeah.
how does Catholics define that?
yeah, it's you shed your blood, you got killed because you were a Christian. That's a martyr, right? All right, and so that's what we use. We have confessors. Confessors are those who suffered some fairly serious persecution without dying from it. Like that would be a confessor. And then we've got pastors, religious, holy men and women, virgins. We've got these other different categories, and they're liturgical categories. These are liturgical categories. So when we're honoring, let's say, although they don't use confessors in the modern Roman calendar, and I think that's a loss, but never mind that.
Well, but Pageau said something like in order to be a martyr, you have to die. Well, he used the word nation. You have to die for your nation. And I was like, oh, I like that. That's juicy. It's really juicy, right? You can't just, you can't just like die as a Christian, whatever, right? Because it turns out, I don't know if you know this, Father, but, and I'm not making a hard claim here because I don't have direct experience, but it's just that everybody dies. It's what I mean, I'm not 100% sure, but it's
for all practical purposes true.
Okay, then yeah, you need a way to distinguish how you die from martyrdom, right?
Sure. The way when the Congregation for the Cause of the Saints look at it, and we've got a saintly person that they're proposing, what category for martyrdom, they will look for: did they die in hatred of the faith? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And they've come up with a new category in the 20th century, and I think it's fine. And that's an offering of life, right? So no, this person, St. Maximilian Kolbe, he's at Auschwitz, and he offers to take the place of another prisoner in a decimation. So he decides, this guy's got a wife and kids outside the camp that he wants to get back to. I'm a priest, and I think now's the time. I'm just going to offer to take this place. And the guards went along with it, which is interesting to me. But hey, there we have it. And then he was 14 days in a starvation bunker without having, an American belly on him. And then they had to actually finally kill him with a lethal injection.
Didn't he sing?
He was singing. Yeah, they were singing
bunker?
hymns. They were singing hymns in the starvation bunker. And they came up with a category for that and a few similar sorts of cases called an offering of life, even though his death wasn't caused by, oh, you're a Catholic or you're a Christian. It's it's kind of close to martyrdom. And with an offering of life, I think you can wear red. So they're liturgical categories where it comes down to. That's how the Romans do it. It works well enough as far as I could tell. But yeah, I guess we got to get our color-coded martyrs here in from the East. Because the word does just mean witness, right? Like that's what a martyr is a witness. And so talking about like a martyr who didn't die is perfectly, especially if you actually speak Greek, like makes perfect sense. Oh, he witnessed to Christ without dying. So that's all I know about that.
Well, I just found Pageau's, you have to die for your nation, right? I was like, oh, I like that. That's, but then I'm also prone to hierarchical ways of parsing things.
Right. And there's, Chesterton contrasts martyrs with the suicidal, and that's a useful thing to do. It's not that they die because they hate life. They die because they love something a lot, and they're willing to die for it. So
they love it more than their own life, right?
More than their own life, absolutely.
Yeah, you have to discern those things. But the question is, what rises to level of martyr, right? And that's more. I like the idea that, like if you died for your family, was being persecuted or something, that whatever, that's good, that's great, do that, but also it's not quite a martyr yet, boy. But again, that could just be me going, I like more hierarchy, please.
I feel like a hero, right? Because that
doesn't work. It's heroic.
Well,
we need
heroes are born. Heroes are born. You're born a hero or not. That everybody misses this in the literature. It's right in the literature. You're either born a hero or not. and almost
So-
always
so-
you're a demigod, right? You have some
Sure,
godly birth, or it's bestowed upon you by some sort of godly entity. That's in all the literature. There's no literature for that. Except we'll say really recent literature, all of which is trash, but whatever.
So there's a certain instinct that operates in the level of the family. We'll think especially of the father of the family, but it's not strictly limited there, where like there's a bit of an expectation that you would give your life for your wife and your children.
And that's heroic.
It's heroic. It's a good thing. We're not going to get in the way of this.
Right.
But it doesn't have quite the same level as Maximilian Kolbe dying for a stranger. Like that's
right. That's that. Right. The
that's
level.
a higher level thing, right?
That's higher.
And they don't conflict with each other. But
right.
But one of them's higher than the other.
Well, they scales up.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So for me, it's like, well, at what scale is it martyrdom? I like this idea, if you die for your nation, that would be kind of cool, right? And whatever, maybe that's not right, but it would be interesting. Oh, you got to take that, Father. That's a juicy one.
Yeah. I wonder if the church would ever accept as a martyr a Protestant who died for Christianity as a martyr. Thinking of
Jim Elliot,
who died in remote
The
places.
Catholics will take anybody. They literally will take anybody. They are the least discerning people on the planet. Seriously.
I think if we were able to wrap some of these schisms up, we might be able to start doing that. Right. So here's a real interesting thing, is that Jess could be a Benedictine, third order Benedictine.
as a Protestant.
As a Protestant, you could be a third order Benedictine because the Benedictine tradition is older than the schism. And so the Benedictines, they'll be like, okay, there's going to be some of these sacrament things that you can't do, but like so the third orders are like people who live in the world, but try and participate in the spiritual life of a particular religious order. And I met an Anglican guy. He was an Anglican pastor. And I was at a Benedictine monastery, and he was a Benedictine oblate, right? He was really funny because he's like, yeah, man, being an Anglican is weird because we've got like 7 sacraments, 2 hard ones and 7 soft ones. It's just, which is really funny. So definitely after a schism, is resolved, we could probably start importing their saints. I think certain Orthodox or certain Eastern Catholics are able to venerate saints from the period of the schism in their own churches. They might not get added to the Roman calendar, but it's like you're a big fan of who was that? The hesychasm guy. I can't remember. Gregory Palamas. Okay, you can venerate Gregory Palamas over in your churches, and that'll be fine. There was a group of Christians that were martyred by the Islamic State in the Levant 10 years ago. And it was a mix of like Coptic Orthodox and Coptic Catholics. And I think Pope Francis recognized them all because it was all like one incident. And the only reason that they were killed was because they were Christians, and they didn't care what flavor of Christianity they were getting there. Yeah.
Well,
But
Protestants aren't supposed to have saints, but we do anyway.
Well, Saint
Because
Luther-
like when I was doing missionary work, Jim Elliot, I don't know if you know the story of Jim Elliot, but he went with 4 other guys to go reach this unreached Amazonian tribe, and they were pilots, and so they flew in a little airplane and landed on a beach there on the river, and the tribe murders them with spears because they're cannibals, and so they don't know what these guys are doing. But anyway, their wives go in after them, and then because of the death of their husbands, and because the wives came, basically all the tribes in the area convert to Christianity. and it like, and she, the wife of Jim Elliot, kind of the main guy, she ends up writing a lot of books and speaks at a lot of conferences, and or she used to. This happened a while ago. This happened in like the 60s. So I think she's passed, but she wrote a lot of books about his story and about, giving your life for the gospel kind of thing, and reaching out to people, and then telling the story of the tribe people coming to know Christ. And it's like, and it's not like a simple story. It's very fraught with all kinds of things, as you can imagine. As a wife, you're going to the killers of your husband, and you're going to go preach the gospel to them, and at first they don't really even care. And like, so anyway, all that to say, like, the reason why I know that story is because it was told so many times to me in our mission, in our, even during sermons in churches and stuff. He would get brought up as an example of faith and stuff. And then one other example is, I went up we had like a youth conference. And so like our youth group went up to the youth conference, and it was at this small Bible college up in North Kansas City, Midwestern Baptist Theological Seminary, something like that. Small little university, but they have like a big meeting hall that the conference was at. And so I was just like wandering around the grounds, and I see this room, and it's got these big glass windows and stuff. And I like look in there, and it's just beautiful. It's this beautiful library. And I'm like, oh, this is awesome. And I walk in there, there's like no one in there, like completely silent. And I'm just looking around, and all up above around the whole room are all these paintings of the life of Charles Spurgeon, the English preacher, the Calvinist preacher. And in that room, they have the actual rail from the church that he preached at. And he had this big booming voice. And, this was before microphones or whatever, and he would preach to 5,000 people at a time. And anyway, some guy in Missouri had bought his library because it was going up for auction, and they were like partying out all the books and stuff. He's like, we got to keep this together. So got all that. But then there's like all these paintings of Spurgeon and like the story of his life and painting and whatever. I'm like, this is like the Cathedral of Saint Spurgeon.
I guarantee you didn't have any bones, did you?
What?
You didn't have any bones.
No bones.
No. And well,
that would be a bridge too far right there.
Like I thought it actually made me like Spurgeon. I have been very critical of Spurgeon because he's some of the stuff he says like is very hardline Calvinist. It's very difficult to swallow some of the things he says. Like anyway, I'm really critical of him because he's like the worst. Sometimes the worst of the worst Calvinists will say Charles Spurgeon quotes to make their points. Like, this is the kind of thing he is. But that whole experience like made me like love him. Like, oh, I love this guy. Like, even though I don't like agree with what he was saying or whatever, it actually like, I don't know. I started reading more about him, and he kind of had a little bit of he probably struggled with depression his whole life. And he would have these, like these terrible episodes. And, where he would be like incapacitated on the floor, weeping and crying how he's not good enough, that kind of thing. And, and it's being fed by this sort of Calvinist doctrine of total depravity and some of these other points that were probably not necessarily good for him. But also like he also had like a tremendous faith about him. And he really did reach a lot of people in ways that no one else could. Like, the way he preached was unlike anything else. And so and really he had a big heart about him, and he loved people, and he's a complicated character. Yeah, here, I'll grab something real fast. I can show you.
I guarantee you, if Spurgeon was a
Here's the children's book, An Introduction to Charles Spurgeon.
That's great.
Isn't that hilarious? I follow this cartoonist on Instagram, and he had like put together this little children's book about Spurgeon, and I had to buy it. I was like, that's hilarious.
That's awesome.
What a crazy book.
So PVK talks about this every once in a while, or he used to. I haven't listened to him in ages, but he used to talk about, like, oh, you think Protestants don't have saints, huh? Oh, you think Protestants don't have idols, huh? And he just fully admits, no, of course they do, right? They lie about it effectively. They just say they don't, but they do.
Yeah.
And
they do stop and bone. They have lines. They have lines. I guarantee you, if Spurgeon was a Catholic saint, we would do processions with his bones, every year on his feast day, right? And you would come and you would venerate the. We got awfully close to it though with that preaching rail, right? Like that's a second class relic right there.
Yeah, not. I mean, all the books were his, and there was the preaching rail, and there were like a couple other artifacts that were not just books. It was like other stuff that was like, oh, we got to get that and bring this here and like put it in this space and like
relics. Artifacts for archaeologists.
Yeah, but those are the patterns. Like, those are the patterns that we have to deal with. Right. And if your religion doesn't account for them correctly, then you're gonna run into trouble.
Well, of all the Protestant denominations, Calvinists should have been the ones that would know the better, but they've got this library up there. It's beautiful. I love it. I absolutely like just because of that fact, I love it, because it's like, you can't deny it. Like, it's just there. And like, I'll even joke around with people that I know that have gone to the school and whatever, and be like, yeah, I went to St. Spurgeon's Cathedral, and they laugh. They're like, yeah, we know.
Nice. But you need that grounding, and especially historical version of grounding. You need that, right? Otherwise, you're just floating in space all the time, forever and ever, and splitting constantly and splitting more, right? You need something to ground you back to. Why were we doing this again, right? Because your interpretations, like river's never the same, you're never the same, right? So your interpretations constantly has to move, but then you have to refer back to something. That's why tradition's important. That's why liturgy helps keep you, together, and keeps you together while opening a space. That's something that came up in the Language of Creation book club on navigating patterns this past Saturday, right? Like it does both. Like, you can't look at it as, wow, liturgy's holding me in, or tradition's holding me in, or rituals holding me in. It's like, but it's also holding things together and affording a bunch of things and allowing you to open a space so that things can come into that space, and that allows you to understand things like miracle better.
Yeah, well, and that's what great men of faith and women of faith do for us. They, like, I think that's why the church was building churches on the places where the martyrs died, is because like it's the death, or it's the life of the saint that's completed. Their life is complete in their death, and then out of that grows this space that will establish something for many, many more people.
Yeah, I was surprised they mentioned that in Universal History, in the last Universal History. They were like, oh yeah, there's a reason why you build churches on top of saints and martyrs. And I was like, wait, what? Excuse me? I was like, hold on a second. What? And then I'm like, all these churches, they're not built right.
They're not built right.
Mark, we do it right. So Holy Cross Catholic Church in West Fargo is beginning their final stages to dedicate their new church, which is still under construction. And one of the things I do as director of liturgy is I printed out a list of the relics of saints that we have in our possession at the Diocese of Fargo, so that they can select which relics are going to go inside the altar. So if we can't build the church at the on top of the bones of the saints, we can put the bones of the saints into the church, which is almost as good.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so when a new church is built, relics are a part of that like it does, because obviously not every place a church is built someone has been martyred.
Right. So we've got St.
Lane.
Agnes relic. We've got some St. John Vianney, some St. Pius X. I think we got a couple Aloysius Gonzagas in there. So it's not
what,
like
what is a relic? Like it's
a
is it
little
just
piece
like
of their bones.
just bones, or does it include other?
Well, there's like a little reliquary, like a little brass or gold casing with a little bit of padding in there, and there's a little note that says, their name, but yeah, bones. And then
Mhm.
with some of them, we have paperwork attesting to their authenticity, and some of them are somewhat more dubious authenticity and will require some investigation. So that's
But it's not like a
one of the
piece of their clothing, or it's like actually like
those are
part of it.
So we have first class relics, that's
Okay,
body
there you go.
parts. Second class relics are things that they had and would have used a lot. You could get like a little piece of Padre Pio's habit, something like that.
Mhm.
And then third class relics are holy objects that have been touched to first class relics. The third class relics, those are easy. I've got a third class relic right here.
Oh,
Can you buy them in the gift shop?
No, but you can make them yourself pretty easily, right? So this rosary, which unfortunately has fallen to pieces, was touched to the stone where Christ was crucified and the stone where he resurrected at the
Wow.
Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And so that's why I'm holding on to it until I can find somebody who can repair these things. But maybe I'll repair it myself. I don't know.
So does the Ziploc baggie become a fourth class relic?
yes. Containers of third class relics are now. No, I like that, but I think it's important for Sally to know. Yes, it's all voodoo, and you don't have any, which is why the Baptists keep splitting. You're doing it wrong.
If you go to Appalachia, you can find all kinds of Christian voodoo happening.
Oh yeah,
The snake
Appalachia's
handlers
a
and
wild
the
place.
Yeah.
You can find anything in Appalachia. It's like Bigfoot and the Loch Ness monster kissing. Appalachia happening there right now for sure. Guarantee you, man. That place is weird.
Let me tell you the big difference between worship and veneration for a Catholic is that we don't offer the Eucharist to anybody but the Father.
Mhm.
Right? All of the Eucharistic prayers at all of the historic Catholic churches have always been offered only to the Father. And if somebody tried to offer the Eucharist to Our Lady and I was there, I think I would probably hit them like some priest. I would just, it would not be, I would not, it would just, but people just would intuit this, right? Like,
Yeah.
you could take some rather uneducated Catholics, and if they heard somebody talking about offering the Eucharist to Our Lady, they would lose their minds, even though they wouldn't know why. So I think that's the big difference right there. But it's like if it's everything that's like higher than you that you need to show some sort of deference to, like you're not necessarily going to be able to, because it's all up. It's not like up and down. Where you get that nice contrast.
Right.
So yeah, that's what I think.
I think actually Appalachia is more like Loch Ness monster and Bigfoot kissing at the wedding ceremony presided by a UFO alien people. Yeah, that's better. Sorry, I had to do it off the cuff. Yeah, well, there you go. Savannah's going. I got to get down to Savannah again. I haven't explored Savannah. I keep telling myself I'm gonna, and then all kinds of wacky things have been happening. So I never get around to doing any of these cool things I want to do. But we'll do it. So yeah, were you there like yesterday? Because I left this morning. I wasn't in South Carolina for long. We drove out of there, went the opposite direction of Savannah.
Yeah, this time of year. This is just the worst time of year to travel, and we do it anyway because the holidays have fixed days.
No, it's not the worst time of year to travel. You just have to do it before Wednesday. So I'll be in New England tomorrow, and we ain't moving. Where we're going, we're staying there for the whole duration, and then we're leaving from there and going straight back home. With a lot of
Yeah.
cops. Oh my good! I've never seen so many police in South Carolina, North Carolina. Not as many in Virginia as usual. A lot in Delaware though.
All right. Thanks
Yeah.
for letting me hang out with you guys. I'm going to keep listening, but I got to do some
Oh, see you,
work while
Jess.
I listen.
Peace, Jess. It was a delightful conversation.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. It was great to talk with you guys again.
We're not going
Yeah.
for much longer anyway. I'll be surprised if you don't shut it down right now, Father.
You sound bitter about that.
I'm not bitter.
Look, we have guests downstairs right now. I should probably go say hi to them.
You should.
That's
I
why
need
I had
to
to
get
shut-
some hot cocoa. So
That's why I had to shut my camera off. Was like they were arriving. So, okay, this was a good stream. Glad people showed up. I'm glad they talked. See, Mark wasn't too mean to them, and I was always very, very nice. Yeah, and so thank you all for tuning in. And good night, and God bless you all.